Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
Luka, Luka Rejec. Nice to meet you, Manny. How's it going?
Good, good. Nice to meet you too. I'm so glad I get to talk to you. Ultraviolet Grasslands and the Black City, second edition, also referred to as UVG by fans. I played the first edition of this game a few times, and I love this game. It's one of the few games. So I'm a forever game master, forever dungeon master. But UVG is one of those where if I'm playing it, I want to play as a player. I want to explore this
hmm
crazy, fantastic, strange world. It is so unique. I honestly put it up there as not just a game book, but as a work of art of how it's presented. There's nothing I cannot compare this to any role playing game that I could think of at the moment. It's just so unique and it's like ideas. But yes, thank you for
Thank
taking the
you.
time to talk
Thank
to
you.
us.
Watch my head swell.
So let's start at the beginning. Where did you get the idea to create Ultraviolet Grasslands?
Uh, the idea for the name itself or the setting itself?
Both.
Okay, so for the setting itself, I was looking for something to write for the Patreon. This was like 2016. I was trying to figure out what would be an interesting thing to do there, what to do. And first, I tried to do like a collaborative choose your own adventure kind of thing, which wasn't really, well, wasn't so great, wasn't working out, wasn't giving me the right vibes. Then I thought, hey, I've got my home game that I'm running, and there's this whole section of it that in the home game we haven't actually touched yet. Why don't I explore it with you folks? And people are like, "Hmm, okay, we can try this." And I just sketched out like a few locations where it goes, and people were interested. And then I started writing, and it started getting bigger. I got a few inputs along the way, and got bigger and bigger. And then eventually, I originally planned it to be 30 locations. It ended up being 32 locations because I knew what the end point was going to be, the Black City. And I knew the starting point, the Violet City, which had been sort of sketched out in the campaign we were playing already. But the parts in between, I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen. So instead of being 30, it ended up being 32. So that's how it started. Um, the name itself, it comes from this setting that we played. We actually created it collaboratively with my players. So I sort of drew the outlines of a map, the Circle C, by drawing a big circle on a piece of paper, obviously, and started putting down places. And eventually, this concept came out together with the other players that there's a whole rainbow of different lands scattered around this Circle C. And the one in the west was the Violet City and the Purple Land. And then what's beyond violet? Well, it's ultraviolet. So that's where the name came from.
How would you best describe this game? So when I talk to other players, other
Mm,
friends about this game, I describe it as um, a, a game of exploration, of journey. Yes, it's sort of
mm,
post-apocalyptic, but it's there's magic. There's all sorts
mm,
of wondrous things. I can't really pin it down. Kind of like the best comparison I may give this to another setting, maybe the one from Adventure Time, where you're not
hmm
sure where it takes place. It could be
Yeah.
the past for all we know. Um, but it's a game where you start at one place and you have all these series of adventures to get to the
Mm,
Black City, and you want to get to the Black City because it's a place of wonder, of mystery and magic. Pretty much one of the I don't know if safe is the right word, but it's definitely a place where I think your character is considered home. Um,
mm.
am I correct in explaining UVG?
I mean, the Black City, it kind of depends on the game itself because it's sort of very protean. Like the concept of it changes, and depending on what the players project onto it, that's what it becomes, and it sort of plays with that concept as well. That the actual Black City is experienced differently depending on what the players were looking for. But the core of it, yeah, I think it's this strange long trip. And like I really struggled throughout my long DMing career to come up with some way to make a game really feel like, wow, that was like a long trip. Like I remember when I first read The Lord of the Rings, and there was just this sense of like, wow, this is a big world. They went on a big adventure. And then I played D&D, and it's like we're hex scrolling, 6 mile hexes. And I'm like, for my last holiday, we took a car and we drove 200 miles. Like, and here we're hex scrolling, and it's 10 hexes to the end of the map. Okay, that's 60 miles. Like just in my head, it didn't feel big enough. So I was trying to capture that, and then Strange Long Trip also conveniently plays into like some of the influences. Like there's Grateful Dead album called Strange Long Trip, or is it a song? And it's like there's a lot of this music from like the 60s, 70s, early 80s that sort of plays into it, and I really kind of played with it. So yeah, Strange Long Trip, or like a science fantasy Oregon Trail kind of adventure.
And this has its own rule system. This is not a Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition, not supplement. This is not a game that's like for Dungeons and Dragons Fifth Edition or any other system. It's its own rule system. Am I
Well,
correct?
it does, yeah, but it's a very loose and relatively light system. Like I think it's quite a light system. Um, some people think it's too crunchy, but those kinds of
Hmm.
discussions. But it's quite light because a lot of the systems are quite optional, and a lot of the heft is just there's a lot of content, so there's a lot of options, but you don't really need them. The core of it, you can boil it down to like one page. It's a D20 roll high system, so fundamentally that's there. Um, so that the book is kind of self-contained and self-referential, that you don't have to go somewhere else to understand how to play it, that you don't have to adapt to some other system. But because of its structure as a D20 system, I think that anybody, like whether they're using old school essentials or D&D 5th edition or Knave or Into the Odd, should find it relatively easy to adapt it. Somebody who's a purist might say, "Oh, but then like my experience of the monsters is going to be different from the default setting. Like these monsters are going to be stronger; those are going to be weaker." Um, but I think the way the book is set up, those fights aren't really the point, because that's a little bit of where like the old school sensibilities really come in. You wander off as like a low level character or whatever level, and then you just wander into divine creatures way beyond your any conceivable power level that have been here since the beginning of time, and you don't actually have to fight anything in the game, at least the way I conceived it. Like you can always run away.
Yeah, the rules are maybe what, less than 10 pages. I want to say, of how to make a character and how combat and skill checks work, and then the rest of the book, which is over 200 pages, it's setting. You put like so many, and it's not just setting. You're not saying, okay, here's a desert and here's
Mm,
the mountains. They're all very weird, very strange, and there's so many options. You put so many charts in these sections so that there's no way anyone could play this. Go to the there's no way that anyone could go to the same location and experience the same thing.
mm.
No, there's no way, unless you rolls incredibly, incredibly well
Yeah,
in that
but
regards.
even then, as soon
Uh,
as you have different players, they're going to react differently, and then it just spirals off. So I guess the other part of that is it's partly written to my general style of dungeon mastering, game mastering, because I like to go on tangents and I like to wing it and see where things go. Like I like to discover the story through play. So I want to be surprised by what happens. I want to be surprised not just by what the players do, but okay, what happens because of that. So it's kind of written. I kind of wrote it in that way, that lots of times there's just like an open-ended question or mystery, and that I can even sometimes turn it around to my players. Well, what do you think about this, or what do you know about this? Or have you heard something about this? And that it can then feed off of that and slowly build into some personalized quests that mm, succeed or fail.
how did these setting ideas manifest
Mm.
in your brain? Like,
Ah, I
did you just
read
go?
really a lot as a kid.
Mm.
I think that's the simple answer. I read really a lot of books, all kinds of books. So, fantasy, science fiction, history, science, technology, all kinds of stuff. And I think that's where it came from. It just yeah, just fertilizing it and then mixing it up. I think that's actually the way to get something quite creative is not to be too fixed in your sources. So for me, sometimes I'll see a setting which is like heavily inspired by this movie, and there's a part of me that as soon as I see that, I'm like, well, I could just watch the movie, right? It's not really, that's a bit harsh, but sometimes it's true. Sometimes you could just watch the movie.
If I may ask, did it take a long time to develop each of these settings? Because not just you're not just describing it. You're the amount of options. You go in there and there's like you roll for like maybe the different shops, different
Yeah.
scenarios that you may encounter in each one. If I may ask, did that was each setting like a challenge for you?
Mm, that's a good question. It took time. It was definitely like there was layering because as I worked on it over time, then I started to know the backstory of the different places. Well, like my head canon, which I tried to avoid explaining in the book itself. So my head canon is as much as possible. It's not clear. So it wasn't really a challenge because I kind of knew where I was coming from and what the different places were doing. And then once I was going there, and then new ideas would spark as I was writing. And it was a challenge in the sense of like it took a long time. There's a lot of words, but the writing itself, fortunately, was quite fun.
Let's talk a little bit about character creation. Do you mind sharing some of the ideas behind how character creation works in this system and why you chose, if you
Mm.
remember, why you chose the rule system that you've made for this?
Yeah. So the core of it, oh, I do remember. I've been working on the free companion rule set. So that one just finished. I finished that earlier this year, and the layout is now largely finished. So um, the core of it is, like I said, a D20 system, and the core of it is that the characters are not limited in the kinds of traits they can have. So there are no level locks or limits. You just acquire different traits and different items, which kind of end up defining what your character can do. So um, the really kind of core thing, I guess, there is that it has the system has three different inventories. So each character has three inventories. There's one for the traits, which are innate aspects, things that they know, things that they are, which can be quite descriptive. Then there's the items, which are physical objects, magic items, and then there is an additional inventory for overflow if some character wants to have too many attributes, or for burdens. So essentially, like, the character gets cursed, something happens, and each one of those inventory slots applies a penalty to all the rolls. So you're playing with these three slot inventory systems to assign all your different traits, all your different items, and all the different effects that afflict you. And then on top of that, you just have six attributes, which you have. I kept six attributes because it's such a common thing in most of the D&D and D&D derived systems that, again, part of my thought process there was to keep it simple to convert to other systems. So everybody's familiar pretty much with the classic, strength, dexterity, constitution. Here they're named a little bit differently, they work a little bit differently, but fundamentally, if somebody wanted to just translate that, it's kind of easy. And because you can build your character any way you want, you can end up with these really, really wacky characters. And at its core, in terms of getting bonuses to your rolls, it depends on your traits and your attributes. So for your traits, you get the bonuses when they would reasonably apply, which is a very loose description. But it's like if your background is that you are a captain of the guard in a city, then when you're doing something that a captain of the guard would know how to do, you get a bonus to it. So this also makes it a question of negotiation between the player and the game master to decide exactly what this means in this game at this table. And so you end up with quite unique characters that have quite unique abilities. And I know this doesn't appeal to everyone, but again, appeals
Mm,
to my kind of playing. So there you
mm.
go.
Yeah, and talking about the setting again, because I really love how different they are. I love the names for some of them. The Forest of Meat, the Cage Run, Ribs of the Father. Such a I love
Hmm.
these great names for them. Now, I'm not going to ask you which is your favorite setting because that's not really fair. It's just that there's too many great ones here. But if I may ask, did you ever? Is there a story? Is there a scenario that you've experienced playing with someone or you heard of that you're really surprised of when they entered into one of your settings?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like when I heard from people like how they experience the different locations and destinations in the UVG and the kind of stories that grew out of that multiple times. Like I've been amazed at the kind of stories that spun out of that and the adventures they had. From like one of them, the caravan became a traveling wrestling show, and they ended up. I think they ended up having a wrestling match at the end of time to bring a dead god back to life. And I was just like, okay, I didn't see that coming. And that generally happens nearly every time because like a lot of it is just setting up situations and problems and like not not situations that are completely chaotic, but situations that are unstable. Like and then you throw in players and like what's gonna come out of that? And I don't know, but sometimes something really cool comes out of that. Um, and yeah, like they turned into very different stories at the end.
Let's talk a little bit about the artwork for Ultraviolet Grasslands. What's interesting to me is that when you first read the book, at least for me, it seems like
Mm.
it seems like a very tough environment. You have to watch out for your supplies. Trade is a very important thing in this game.
Hmm.
Um, Bartering, things like that. But the artwork gives almost like a different sense of like hope. Like, hey, this place maybe looks like it's falling apart, but there's a future here. There's something here.
Mm.
I think it's very wondrous because it makes it even more fantastic. It makes it feel like okay, it seems like the tone is this way, but it's kind of like giving you to that Twilight Zone type of ending where
Yeah, yeah.
that feel where it's like it's going to give you something totally different.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the artwork behind this?
So I drew it. Yeah, I did the art. No, but the tone, actually, that is something that I really wanted to come through because I always had this feeling like if you read history, there's this sense of fall of the Roman Empire, and then it's like, oh, and then people are living in dirt shacks, and they're all just thinking, oh my God, life is so horrible now that we don't have all those wonderful amenities that the Romans had. But the simple fact is, like, most of the people living there had no idea what a hypocaust was. They didn't know about like hot and cold running wine or stuff like that. They didn't imagine this. This was just fairy tales. So they're there among the ruins of the giants. They tell each other stories, but in their day-to-day lives, it's like I don't know. Am I going to meet the pretty milkmaid from the other village at the village fair next month? You know, and then you see her, and it's like it's flowers and sunshine. Like you're not thinking about I'm living in a ruined world. And then I just thought to myself, okay, let's imagine that like you layer this layers and layers and layers of history, so much history that literally nobody can know all the layers of history anymore. Um, would I mean the natural human inclination is to just take it as that's just the way things are, and then you just live on with it. So that dissonance, I think, comes from us as readers in a modern world, in as far as you know, the first industrial civilization on Earth, and we approach this, and it's like, oh my God, these are fallen times. They do not have the powers that their ancestors had, or their creators, or whatever they may be. This must be so depressing for them. And then it's like, from the point of view of these people, it's like, this is just life, you know. There's like, yeah, over there you have to be careful because there's the giant walking city and it can stomp you. But also, you know, it's like it drips oil, so you can go fuel up if you go behind it carefully. And it's like at the most strange and unusual things are just normal to a person like that. So recently I've been because of my daughter, I've been watching a lot of Studio Ghibli movies, and I was actually fascinated because I never watched them that much, and I was like, huh, that's a similar vibe.
Well, yeah, that's true. It has that strange sense of wonder, and one movie is not the same as the next. You're getting something totally
Yeah,
different each time,
yeah,
you watch the movies. But there is a connection of each movie is connected by that sense of like weirdness and wondering. You're not sure what's happening, what's going on
yeah.
with the journey these characters are going. But it is fantastic, just like this
And
game.
it's not, yeah, and there's some happiness. It's not grim. So,
It seems like it should be grim, but it's not. It's like again, it's kind of like it's like it teases like okay, there is darkness, but there's also this
mm,
wonderfulness that you're not seeing. At least the characters
mm,
are not seeing. If I may ask, so I felt first edition UVG was perfect. I couldn't think of any.
mm,
You asked me like, hey, can you make changes to it? I wouldn't know what to do. It's fine as it is. What
mm.
made you decide to go second edition with this?
So there were two reasons. Like the rule set in first edition wasn't completely finished as far as I was concerned. Like there were some tweaks I wanted to do, and you know, like as a writer, as an artist, you sort of return back to things and then think to yourself, ah. And also because I tried to do the full rules and the full setting in the same book, it ended up being a little bit mm, cramped. So I had a limit in the number of pages I had available, and I ended up leaving out some art that I really felt should have been in there, and some of the art was smaller than I wanted to be. And so I decided to take the rules out, make them the well, take the core character rules out. So I've left the caravan rules in, so the traveling mechanics, because they're like the real core of the Ultraviolet Grasslands that are distinct for it is the mechanics for traveling, for how to run your caravan, how to trade, how to uh, make connections between these destinations in the vast lands. So I left those in, so it was much more focused just on this, on the strange long trip. And the rules themselves, the longer form of the rules, I took them out, and over the last roughly year, yeah, last year and till early this year, I finished them up, and now they're packaged up in a nice PDF called the Vastlands Guidebook. They take those rules from the UVG first edition and make them a freely available PDF, and also then mm, it's going to be in print as well as a book via Exalted Funeral, because my thought there is also at the table, if you are the referee, you want to have the setting book so that you can share this with the players. But the rules for like how to make the players and stuff like that, it's good to have it in a separate book so you can just like hand it out and people can check, and like when you want to review the equipment and stuff like that, you can pass it around. Now, ideally, I would also make a players how do you say players gazetteer to the setting, you know, so they could just have like, oh, here's a picture and short text for each of the locations. And it's that is something that I've been thinking like, oh, this would be nice to do, but I haven't got around to that one yet.
The cover for UVG second edition, this right here,
Mm.
I love the use of colors, but what would you say is happening here exactly? It looks like some travelers have found looks like a dwelling place, but it's very unusual.
Oh, so this one would most likely be that they found one of the dreaming gods scattered in the grasslands. So it's playing with the fact that as they travel around, they're finding these ancient creatures and powers, and there's a certain recursive nature to it where they do gain the ability to influence the setting itself, to change it, to make it different. So So it's a little bit playing with that. So you have like the characters interfacing with the god and changing the god's dreams, and this is changing the setting. So it's playing with the fact that the setting is imaginary. So since it's imaginary, the players, the characters should also be changing this imaginary setting as they go.
So the interior design of the book is very clean. The artwork, I love the artwork. You did a fantastic job. Is there
Thank you.
do you have a do you have a is there a particular artwork, a particular piece maybe that you're most proud of?
There are some that I really like. So that one there, right there, the lovely lady on the top right. I
Mm.
think that one came out really well, considering because it's like very 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 sketchy. So it's I don't feel like I'm that good at drawing. Like it's a continual learning process, and like a lot of people, every time I go online, if I go like on Instagram, I'm just like, oh my God, everybody knows how to draw better than me. That's terrible. Um, but I do have some artists that are really quite inspiring to me. And like I'm impressed by the style of Mobius, but it's not really um, the exact style that I look for. I'm really impressed when I see some artists. So like Hugo Pratt, who did Corto Maltese, who has this really flowing, very simple style that it's quite sketchy, but it tells everything. And I'm trying to approach it sometimes. I don't always succeed, but that's so surprising. There's some illustrations in there that look very simple, but that work that I'm actually really quite proud of. And then there's the one, I think it's at the beginning of the bestiary. There's like this stomping creature in the background, and there's this flying eagle above it. And that one I quite like as well. But yeah, as you go through them, I'll probably spot some and be like, that one, I like that one as well.
I want to thank Exalted Funeral for giving me a copy of UVG second edition.
Hmm.
They also sent along these two books.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what can you tell me about that? Are they like supplements to UVG?
Yeah, basically. So the Eternal Return Key is the first iteration of like the rules in a standalone zine. So I now call the system the Synthetic Dream Machine (SDM). Again, playing with that machine god on the cover. So the Eternal Return Key has the rules for the creating a character, but they're an alternate character. So it imagines that it's a character who wakes up not quite sure who they were somewhere out in the Ultraviolet Grasslands. So at the location far off, and they're essentially, yeah, amnesia, don't know who they are, and they're finding out who they are through play. So it sets up a different slant on the game because in the usual game you're starting in the Violet City, you're coming from civilization and going into this wilderness, and that one presents this idea where it's like this character just woke up from a malfunctioning cryopod, and what happened? Where are they? So you can see that sets up a very different dynamic for the characters, and then Magitechnica is the distillation of the magic rules from UVG 1E, a little bit expanded over time, and adding some other spells to it as well, and also including a lovely little rocket wizard lair at the end.
Let's talk a little bit about the NPCs and bestiary you have here. You have some. I can't pin down what genre any of them are altogether. They're all they're from different. You can tell they're inspired by very different things. I think my personal favorite right now, and this is difficult because I'm trying not to spoil myself from reading this book because
Hmm.
I wanna play in this book. But the porcelain princes, these like
Hmm.
techno liches sort of creatures that are trying to find immortality in the weirdest of ways.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is there any NPC or monster in this book that are maybe some of your favorites or you've heard
Oh yeah,
different
there are
reactions
some.
from
Yeah,
different
like
players?
right at the end, in the Black City, there's this bar or restaurant outside of time, and then there's some weird heroes in there. So those are actually based some of them are based on some of the more memorable player characters in my previous campaigns. The campaigns I ran, so there were other players' characters that I found quite memorable. So there's some of them hanging out there outside of time. Um, and those ones I find I have quite a fondness for. Um, and then in in a very weird way, the characters around the cold lake. So there's this area with like three quite weak factions around it in a very dense area, and like those characters, I have a kind of fondness for me because they're like a little isolated civilizational remnant, and they feel like the kind of place that you could set some small cozy horror adventures or smaller
Mm.
local scenarios.
I have a friend who has taken the first edition UVG and used that as a setting source book for his old school essentials game. So he
Hmm.
uses the book to create the settings he needs for his game, for his OSE game. Um, it, does it surprise you that how these settings are so well made and so random and wondrous that that people are adapting them for different game systems?
No, actually, that was part of my goal from the beginning. To also That's why the system is also light. That's why the character like the NPCs are usually described just like a level and a few adjectives, an adjective or two to describe them, and some text around them, and then there's like a table that breaks down what different levels mean. I've seen, like I said, I've seen people adapt it to all kinds of different systems, and I find that actually really enjoyable to see because I think the act of adapting a system to, well, sorry, a setting or an adventure to a system that you enjoy and are familiar with, I think that's actually both a creative act. So, nice. Creativity is good. It's a way to get to know the system better, and it's a way to get to know the setting better because you're melding them. Um, but it's also a kind of solo play activity that is actually just fun in itself because you come to this and there's some challenge. So it's not automatic. So there's like, okay, this setting, how do I fit it into the system that I'm using? How do I make this fit together? And this challenge, this tension that's happening there is actually kind of fun because when you overcome it, it's like achievement unlocked. Because if it's just completely automatic, you don't have that achievement. You don't have that sense of accomplishment that you've made something. But by actually adapting it, by doing this, you are essentially really making it your own. And I think that's kind of fun.
So, being that you took the time to look at 1E again and then convert it to 2E, to the second edition, looking at your work, did you ever come across like maybe themes or ideas um, that you didn't realize, or maybe you did realize that you were conveying in the book in some way?
No, I think I think I was aware of all the themes. Like the system-wise, there's not such a big difference system-wise between 1E and 2E. There's like some minor things. I honestly believe that if you just play with 1E or if you just play with 2E, uh, or if you just mix them together, there's not going to be a major difference that most players will notice. But then, okay, maybe that's not quite true. There's usually that one type of player who understands the rules very well. So some of the best campaigns I've run were actually where I had one player who was the rules master for the whole campaign group. So I could just focus on running the game, and I could offload knowing all the rules on that player. So it's not true, but most players are just happy so long as the game's coming along. But in terms of themes, no, I think there were a few places where I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, I wrote that better than I remembered. There were a few places where I was like, that's a bit clunky, but overall, no, no, it was good.
So, if I may ask, what's the future of Ultraviolet Grasslands? Do you see yourself making um, more supplements, source books, maybe
I am
32 more
actually
settings?
writing the this. I'm actually so we had the backer kit campaign running in August for our golden age, and that's metaquel to the UVG, sequel, prequel, unclear, temporally, dimensionally unclear, but it's essentially a setting book for the civilized part of the setting for the Circle C. So that part that is mostly sort of like shunted off the map in the UVG, it's like this is where it starts, but we're going away from the civilized lands. And this is a supplement for the civilized lands themselves. So this one is focused a little bit more on rather than a single strange long trip, it's like adventures there and back. So the idea is for more episodic adventures that are like short serials. So I'm thinking adventures that are like 1 to 5 sessions, with an average being of like about 3 sessions, and then returning to a base of operations. So the travel mechanics are different, just to make it a little bit faster, and because you're somewhere civilized, so there's mechanics for traveling with public transport, like you're a tourist, and the kind of bureaucratic procedures you can run into, and so on. There's still weirdness, but it's a little bit more weird things happening on the atomic train or on the living blimp, rather than oh, there's a giant avatar of the noetic biosphere walking through the forest in the distance. Do you go harvest its flowers? So that's one part. And the second part of it is because, like I mentioned, there's a headquarters, so there's a little bit of a mini game around building your own headquarters, building your base of operations, and around how the different kinds of rooms and equipment you build up in your base of operations as a group. It then gives you, it modifies your characters when you go on the adventure. So essentially, there's this sort of idea that your house has individual rooms, and depending on the rooms you have, you can just assign yourself different traits. So the same way that like if a wizard has their own library in the system, they choose which powers they're taking with them, basically which equipment they take, because there's like in the setting there's it's not clear, is it magic or is it very advanced science or whatever, but like he's carrying around this gizmo that beeps and boops, and like you can talk at a distance through it. Is it a crystal ball, is it a shortwave radio, is it something else? It doesn't matter, but it's an item, so that lets them use the power. So this expands it to the rest of the characters, where depending on the kind of base you have, you can then swap out your traits, so you can adapt your character to where you're going at a fundamental level. I mean, considering that it's weird, you can also swap out body parts of your character depending on what you're doing. So it's like, oh, you're going in the water, you might need gills. Do you have a advanced adaptive fish tank in your house? Oh, do you want to get one? And then there's the system also for to go with that uh, for simplified investing. So essentially, I wanted to come up with a way to get rid of, sorry, not to get rid of, to productively invest huge amounts of cash that the characters may acquire through their adventures. Because, like, once you have, 1 million cash, 1 million gold pieces, what do you do with that? Well, here's some options. Also, we have options in case you have 10 million lying around. Uh, and so it expands like what you do in the civilization, and then there's this overarching campaign arc, threat arc, that you can also then like roll into to your game, so that it sort of starts to connect the different episodic adventures together. Um, so we'll see. I hope people are gonna like it, although I'm trying out new things, so.
And do you know what's the timeline of this being released?
So this one, the timeline is to have it released next year. I'm thinking middle of next year. So the text should actually be ready significantly earlier, but then it goes through editing, then it goes through production. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. But so the Vastlands guidebook, which has the rules, which has some additional equipment, it folds in some of the Magic Technica as well, is actually already available.
Hmm.
So I think anybody can get it. The current public beta is available on my Patreon, and I think also on the Exalted Funeral site. But I have to update that file now because that's the nature of a beta. It gets updated. But that one is pretty much nailed down. Like it's going to get some more art. I have to change some of the art. There's some spot art to do, but the text is nailed down.
Oh, so one last question. Um,
Hmm.
if you were if you were stuck in this world, if you
Yeah,
suddenly woke up in the Violet City, what would you do?
I definitely try to leave the pilot city as fast as possible. I mean, I don't want to be enslaved by the telepathic cats. Ah, where would I try to go though? Like there's a few places that are calmer and nicer, I guess. Like the Ribs of the Father are weird with like the Marmot folk. Like I don't think they would accept me. Like the Cerulean
Hmm.
Oasis. Maybe, yeah, maybe go to like one of the big rivers and follow them down to the sea. Not go all the way to the Black City. Just sort of like wander off the map to the south at some point. Head west to the near moon and then kind of south and get away from all the weirdos. Ah, actually, the world canon, like a little bit of a secret, because like I think I mentioned this only like in one blog post in passing, so it's like barely noticed. But there's actually one of the factions living in the far south are the Penguins, and they're ambulatory humanoid penguins. And one of their traits is that they have a cuteness field around them that makes people feel physically ill if they contemplate violence. So that feels like a place that would be very safe to go to.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Ultraviolet Grasslands and the Black City Second Edition. Is it available now for purchase?
I believe it is. Now and again, it goes out of print, but I think it should be available for purchase now. Yeah, at Exalted Funeral. And it's also available as a PDF. And I do have to check. Did I add the first edition PDF to the second edition one as well? I don't know. But yeah, it's available. Um, and then if somebody wants to join the Facebook group, they can find a lot of other fans there. And if they want to join the Patreon, we have a small low-key Discord where uh, I moan to people about my struggles as I write and draw. No, not really. It's not much moaning, but it's a scene. It's a look behind the scenes, where I get really excited and like this is going to work, and then I like write up 2, 3, 4 pages, and then it's like, oh, this is terrible, and then I throw it all away.
Well, I will put all the information in the description below if anyone wants to check it out. There'll be links. Um, yes, again, thank you for your time. And to our viewers out there, thank you for watching or listening. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next time.
It's been a pleasure. Take care.